And we are, okay, got it. We're live.
Good evening. Thank you for all joining us for this discussion we're going to have, the General and I, and we appreciate that you are spending your Friday evening with us. I know some of you are driving home, others are on different platforms or trying to watch us on different platforms. We're on Spaces, we're on Zoom, and those are the spaces we're on right now. And this conversation is very important, especially on the things that are happening both on the national scene, but also we look further to what is happening in the region and on the international scene. Thank you all for joining us. My name is Timonthy Nyangweso, and I'll be your host today. General Mugisha Muntu is here. And if you have a question, please drop it in the comment there, or just drop your comment there, and we'll be able to read some of them. I see some questions already coming in here, and we'll be addressing some of those in a short while. Thank you all for coming, and we really, really appreciate this. This shows that you're concerned about what's happening in this country and you want to do something about it. Good evening, General Mugisha Muntu.
Good evening, Timonthy. I trust you are well.
I am very well, General, and I'm very grateful that you have given time to be able to address issues that are facing in this country, but also to look at them also from a positive angle with solutions on how our country moves on there. But also, happy Women's Day. I know you're not a lady, General, but happy Women's Day to all the ladies that have joined us here. So I'll start with you, General, and we'll start on just one small note. This week on Tuesday, we celebrated Women's Day, and the theme was gender equality, gender equality to bridge the gap there, to bridge the gap of biasness there. So your thoughts on Women's Day in this country? Have we done enough for ladies in this country? And as Alliance for National Transformation, what do you think we need to be doing more for women in this country?
Thank you, Timothy, for hosting me. I thank God that we've all been able to engage for all who are on the different platforms. And also to say congratulations to all the women, Ugandan women and women globally. At the domestic front, the struggle is still on. One of the tools that creates significant advancements in terms of women really is education. But besides education, also empowerment in economic terms. And of course, all that is done when we do it from the position that, you know, like in Uganda, 52% of the population are women. So if you don't put into place mechanisms to lift more than half of the population in terms of education, in terms of skills development, in terms of economic empowerment, that means that really you've created paralysis in that society, because more than half of the population, when it stays in a state of disempowerment, it doesn't only affect the women, it also affects the rest of society, and also children, because women are a significant factor in the manner in which children are brought up, in terms of developing character, in terms of causing confidence in the young men and women who grow up in the hands of women. And therefore, we thank all men and the women who work together from the position of understanding of that and continue pushing ahead for gender equality. Thank you.
Thank you, General. We still wish all the women here happy Women's Day. Even this whole week, we celebrate all the women, mothers, sisters, all the people that are here for the amazing work you do in the different spheres of influence that God has blessed you in. General, let's start from the questions I'm seeing here. And I feel like we need to address some of those issues here. One of the people asks a very pertinent question, and I would like to start with that one because we'll be dealing with something with the opposition there. He asks and says, Timothy, a question coming in. The division in the opposition has continued and it keeps getting ugly. What is happening? Some people thought that a senior leader like you, General Muntu, perhaps you will be able to help and bring your colleagues in order. Tell us what is happening and how can we bring it in order, General?
Well, we are products of our society, first and foremost, those of us who are involved in politics and at the senior levels of leadership. So a number of times we reflect the culture within our society. Nevertheless, when you're operating at a level like we are, at a leadership level, and more so in a situation where the population, for those at least who want to see change, and more so those who would want to see qualitative change, it can be quite frustrating, I know, when they are looking at how the regime can be removed, but also looking at how the replacements would be better than what would be removed. So I understand the frustration which is in many people when you read here in the media, electronic as well as print. So it is our responsibility as leaders in the opposition to see how we can rectify our ways. One would hope that we'll be having private spaces where we can, lock ourselves behind doors and quarrel. But the moment we get out of those rooms, to ensure that we do things that can, build hope in the population, more so those who want to see change, and also those who would want not just to see change, but qualitative change. Because there are differences, one, of opinion. It is natural, it is a healthy thing. You can have different opinions. There are differences in strategy, there are differences in approach. There are also issues which can generate conflict, more so those which are rooted in our past, where there have been frictions. But I don't think that there is any of that can't be resolved. More so if we get into a situation where we can go behind closed doors and see how to resolve it. That hasn't happened yet, unfortunately. But we'll have to keep pushing separately as individual organizations. And as we evolve, the problems also get resolved. There's no permanent problem. There's no permanent challenge that cannot be resolved. Also, if you get people who get focused on it persistently, eventually there'll be a solution.
General, let's continue in that area of opposition. You seem very optimistic on how we can move forward, especially with the challenges we're having. But the squabble and the bickering that is there seems to be coming from funding. Accusations coming from one president general accusing a whole, the party that is leading the opposition right now, National Unity Platform, about 3 billion shillings. Categorically, they can't deny it. Neither they saying they received the money or didn't receive it, but they also claim they're not part of IPOD. At what point do we stop having these personal egos and put Uganda at the forefront?
Again, I think it is a process. We are all, one, engaged in struggles, but also I would like to believe that developing as individuals in terms of our leadership skills. One hopes that all of us who are vying to influence the future of our politics in this country would have to, one, be honest and know that there are areas where we make mistakes, the areas where we've got shortfalls, but keep learning if we're going to do any better than the regimes we have seen so far in the last 60 years. So eventually, I think the challenge really is a heavy burden, I know, amongst us as leaders. The issues of money, for example. One, the money which the regime is now financing the opposition parties with is about 36 billion. I think it was increased last year. It used to be about 10 billion. And there is a formula. Only parties which have members of parliament are the ones who can access that money, first and foremost. And then even those who are in parliament, it is shared on a formula of representation. If you have 1 or 10 or 20, it is all calculated based on a member of parliament. So the more you have, the more money you get. There are two issues in that regard. And some of the opinions, of course, I express on this matter are personal. They are not party, they are not NT. For example, I hear there is a debate about public funds being used to finance all parties. I think there is a problem in that. I've expressed myself on this, and let me repeat what I've said before. I would like to believe that for the time being, Parliament should be the cutoff point, so that a party which gets a member of Parliament or 2 or 10 or whatever can access that financing. But the danger of saying that any party which gets registered should be financed has a problem in the sense that I've been in this country for quite a while, and I know once people see where there seems to be an opportunity for money, people can easily start parties simply to be financed. So there needs to be a cutoff point for anybody who is in a party to know that, for you to access government funding or public financing, you must work hard to ensure that, one, you get a member of parliament, or 2 or 3, whatever number you do, and also depend on other financing sources, because I don't think that parties should depend wholly on public financing. Public financing should be able to help them in certain areas, but they should also develop their own base for financing from membership and from the Ugandan supporters. There's no way you can expect that the government or taxpayers should shoulder the burden of financing a party 100%. I think that would be wrong at the same time. These just personal opinions. And we don't have a member of parliament yet. We don't access this financing. I don't see any problem yet on that, in regard to that. I know we will get members of parliament as we go along. What I would propose is that the members who are already in, I think there are about 7 parties, need to implement what I think was agreed upon within IPOD, because they had agreed, though it hasn't been implemented yet, that 30% of the money which is available, in this case 36 billion, should be cut, should be used uniformly across all the parties which are in parliament for administrative financing of headquarters and trainings and things like that. Then the 70% can be given based on the number of members of parliament. That would be a good start. As politics stabilizes, as the culture is transformed, then you can go wider than parliament and start looking at, for example, parties that would have local government presence and things like that. I think we should have flexibility in that regard. The unfortunate thing is within IPOD, the movement has got the largest number of members of parliament, and they are short-sighted. They're not looking at building parties. They're just looking at how they can hang on into power. The stupidity in the stance that they take is to forget that there's a time when a ruling party can get out of power. Now, if you don't create an environment in which parties are able to organize themselves so that they are credible alternative political forces which get into power the moment the ruling party gets out, so the country can continue running because there is an organization that is well organized, that is credible, that can continue running the government without causing a lot of paralysis. The movement is short-sighted in that regard. They think that they're beginning and the end, which is not true. I mean, they'll have an end at some point. So when they do things in a manner of undermining the opposition, of causing all kinds of chaos within the political environment, they are like young monkeys that laugh at the forest when it's burning. They don't seem to understand that there is a point when a party gets out of power. I don't know any party in the world that has hung on to power since the beginning of time, and it is still in there, since at least the advent of parties going to parliament. Even the longest serving one, like in Mexico, it was there 70 years. It moved out. You look all over the globe, some have been 30 years, 40 years, they get out of power. Kano here close to us, they were in power for about 40 years. Some of the parties which led African countries into independence, some of them are no longer in existence. UNIP in Zambia, CCP in Ghana, all those in Nigeria are no longer in existence. So we need to understand that. One hopes that there are some open-minded people within the movement who can really start doing things in the interest of the country, first and foremost, rather than looking at how to hang on to power.
General, and I'm glad you have exhausted even talking about African countries there. We also know that IPOD was an idea birthed looking at what happened in Ghana and trying to bring that so that the different think tanks of different multi-party politics is brought there. But the question that I would like to put to you, substance, you have said your personal view is that the yardstick should be parliament. But has parliament given Ugandans substance of leaders there that can be able to advocate for the needs of Ugandans there? Because if we put a yardstick, I think the most we can talk about is the 6th parliament. When we look at the 9th, 10th, 11th, even this 11th, we don't see substance yet. What's your view? Should the yardstick still remain parliament or political parties?
You know, we're in a state of crisis in this country because there are different challenges. One, the challenge of the top leaders who want to hang on to power at any cost. We've had that culture since independence. All leaders who get into power want to manipulate power to their own advantage. That's one problem. Second problem, the political class. We just are driven by self rather than looking at how we can advance a country, build it, become stable, become democratic, become transparent in the manner in which national resources are utilized, and then we can benefit as individuals. So our mindsets are upside down. So, and two, it's not that the anti-Ugandans who know what to do, they are there. And that's another, I think, source of the crisis we face. A significant number of Ugandans who really would do good as leaders, even in politics, as ministers, as RC5 chairpersons, as members of parliament. Many fear to go into politics because for a long time, politics has been made to seem to be a dirty game, as it is said. And then there are many people who say, why should I go into politics where I'm going to be dragged into the mud? So they stay on the outside, and therein lies a danger. Nature hates vacuums. When a vacuum is created, people who want to advance self, for them, they will do anything to occupy any space where they advance self-interest. So those who would want to advance national interest, when they withdraw from the space where politics is played out, the other guys will be in, they become the majority, and they completely distort politics, and that impacts on the mindsets of the population. So the population start thinking that that's what politics is, it will not change. So in the process, they lose hope, and that's the mess we are in right now. But we must break ourselves out of this mess. We are the ones who put ourselves in it. So parliament can have, parliament, Uganda parliament is about 500 people. Really, for us to make a conclusion that parliament, a significant portion of members of parliament are highly compromised, are driven by self. Do we wholly blame members of parliament? Or should we also blame ourselves, the rest of society? Because parliament is supposed to be the cream of our society. So do they reflect who we are? If they reflect who we are as a people, two things, we must bear it. If they don't, then it means there is something we must fix. That people who believe in integrity, people who are honest, and there are many men and women, for me, I know. I keep using this example. Look at the private sector, which operates, works efficiently. They deliver services as they are meant to do. They run organizations, foreign organizations, 90% staffed by Ugandans. And those organizations run efficiently. In the profession, many professionals who could do good work, but they they sit on the fence. So we are paying a price, and we'll keep paying that price until the balance of forces in the active politics, including in parliament, including at RC5, is shifted in favor of people who want to advance national interest before self. There is no magic wand that anybody is going to wave and that happens. It's hard work. We have to keep working that until the shift happens. It can't be magical. So we are part of the problem. And therefore, while Parliament has a problem, we must keep trying to fix the problem, but also maintain it as the criteria. That's what I'm looking at. I don't think you are not going to dismiss Parliament, because if you are going to dismiss institutions which are compromised, then we'll dismiss literally all the institutions we have. You'll dismiss police, you'll dismiss, local governments. There's a lot of corruption there. You'll dismiss civil service, you'll dismiss Parliament. That's not the solution. The solution is change our ways, change our mindsets, draw in more people who are good, who want to do things right, shift the balance of forces in favor of doing what is right, and then the institutions will start performing well.
Thank you, General, for that submission there. But maybe the yardstick, we need to set a reset button here so that everything can be able to turn upside down. But let's stick to IPOD. The interest of IPOD was a think tank of different multi-parties there, so that they can be able to have a discussion in that area there. Do you see it benefiting what the intention was, IPOD to be exact there, or has it become something else, and what is that?
IPOD was an idea which was introduced here from Ghana, because it had helped the Ghanaians in the crisis in which they were to have a transition, a smooth transition. And it worked well for them. Why? Because there was willingness on all sides. Because at that time, Gerald Rawlings himself and his party went into that formation with the opposition parties, and all of them were looking at the survival of Ghana. They were looking at the country. They shifted their eyes from themselves as individuals, from the parties which they belong to. They looked at Ghana, and you can see the dividends Ghana is reaping from that. Now, we don't have that here. In the ruling party, the party is just looking, NRM is looking at just its own survival. And therefore, even when there is IPOD, it is not utilized in a manner in which Ghana utilized it. Nevertheless, my own view, because when they were doing a review at that time, I remember I was still the leader of FDC, the Netherlands body which backs up that IPOD. They got consultants who moved around. They were asking whether IPOD should just be closed down, whether it should continue. My own proposal that time was that while there are challenges within IPOD, that it should be maintained as a vehicle, and the parties which are involved should keep doing all that is necessary to be done, because change is a process, trying to change mindsets, trying to build networks within it and keep on improving it. But in the worst case scenario, when a crisis breaks out, because none of us knows what the future holds, in the worst case scenario, when there is a spontaneous crisis that breaks out, in my own estimation, there needs to be a vehicle that is already established, where hopefully the actors would have already created rapport amongst themselves. Forget about their disagreements, because I can tell you there can be a time when there's such a crisis that people will even forget about their frictions at interpersonal level, frictions in party levels, where you find that they are looking at how to get out of a crisis. You know, human beings seem not to understand. At times, they can see that they're involved in things which can cause a crisis. Many times they do not do things to deter a crisis, but when the crisis happens, that's when they wake up. I can't understand how we operate as human beings in that regard. So in my own estimation, when such a time, if such a time was to occur, we hope it doesn't, we hope things go smoothly, I would like to hope that a vehicle would be in existence. And in that regard, I think IPOD would be the best vehicle through which there can be rallying of forces of those on the side of the ruling party, even if they would be in a state of disintegration, and even those who are in the opposition parties, to see how to hold the country together. Because there is a time when you need to hold the country together and move it out of a crisis. That is my own view about IPOD, even when it has its own current weaknesses.
Let's leave IPOD and talk about something that has become a squabble. The President General of the Democratic Party, and I do not want, unfortunately, he's not here, but there's a squabble there in the opposition. When we look at, it has become something of insulting We're no longer talking about national issues, but we're squabbling about money, squabbling about, who's doing what, who is insulting the other person. And that has been something that has really rubbed Ugandans the wrong way. Someone asked a question, a senior leader like you, why not step in to bridge the gap of whatever is happening in the in opposition, so that we're pushing in the same direction? We seem to be tearing ourselves apart instead of bringing ourselves together to fight for the same cause. We all say a struggle, but it seems the struggle is between us.
Again, I can offer my own personal views on this question, and I've expressed these opinions to all our leaders in the opposition, when we are in closed doors or when we are just alone. I keep indicating the leaders that we just have to learn how to manage differences in terms of approach, differences in terms of strategy, and ensure that we also restrain ourselves in terms of the attacks and the counterattacks. Because yes, at times there can be reasons why maybe people get sucked into attacks and counterattacks, but my hope has always been that could be done behind closed doors so that the public doesn't even get to know what the whole fighting is about. Because the biggest danger that there is, when we suck each other into fights, we create a problem which affects all of us. Because the population at times is not able to differentiate between our differences, the cause of the differences, and at times people don't follow the whole argument, and also have a significant number of people who are emotional, and they get sucked on totally different grounds, not on the grounds of logic or objectivity, and it totally messes up the environment, and therefore it creates further impediment for us to keep building hope in a situation where people seem to be hopeless. So my hope is that, well, the other factor is that we are a new party. In terms of representation, we still have a small representation. We only have 50 leaders, elected leaders, the highest one being a LC5 chairperson, the one of Terego. We have got some mayors of townships and also councillors, in total 50. Now, there are older parties, and there are also parties which have members of parliament. We don't have any member of parliament yet. And the grounds for determining influence so far in our country is mostly based on numbers. And we don't want to force our way into that argument. We as NT, we keep doing the things that we believe should be done. And we keep growing, we keep on giving advice behind the scenes. And then we hope that the future will be able to resolve a number of challenges that we do face overall as opposition parties.
Thank you, General. We'll wrap that topic up there, but we'll ask you that if you have a question or a comment that you'd like to give, please drop it there. Drop it in our comment section there, and then we'll be able to get to it in a short while there. Please drop them there, continue to drop them there. General, let's switch the topics a bit. This week on Wednesday, we woke up to a tweet by Lieutenant General Kainerugaba Muhoozi telling us about his retirement. Not the first time he's coming out to say something like that. Last year, he lambasted and said, you know what? If I'm not given enough financing to be able to do accommodation for senior mess officers, I will retire from the army. So the comment came in there, and I would like to also quote the Chimp report that came out to say there was a call between the president and the first son to comment to say that he will not leave the army there. Your thoughts on this, and what happens to due process on retirement from the army, and are these indications or signs of something to come in the future?
You know, one, the question of General Muhoozi announcing his retirement, I think it's just a question of style. I mean, ordinarily, many officers would put in their papers quietly. I put in my papers. I spent a whole year waiting until I was released. On the day of release, that's when I went public. But it seems he has a different style. And I wouldn't see any problem announcing that he's going to retire. And if he's the criteria on the basis of which, if he fits in the criteria that would enable him to be considered for retirement, the board which sits under the Ministry of Defense can give him papers, and then he exits the army and he can go and pursue, if he's interested in politics, as I see all the tweets and all that, talking about politics. And to me, I think that would be the best route to go. You don't remain in the army, making political statements, and you're not called to order, contrary to what ordinarily should happen. Because I don't think there's any other general in the army who would make the same statements General Muhoozi has been making, and he would not be called to order. So it also creates its own complications. And when we are trying to build institutions, you don't want such a practice to keep on, growing, because it creates its own, problems. There is nothing as bad within an institution as to have a culture of impunity grow, So I hope that if General Muhoozi is honest with his words and he retires from the army fully, then he can go and make whatever political statements he wants to make, like anybody can make them. But when he keeps making political statements while he's putting on uniform, it creates complications for the army. I don't think the army can come out and speak out in regard to that. I also like to believe that also creates problems for the government itself. But I tweeted just about 2 days ago, nobody seems to be either, willing or able to call him to order. So his retirement, I think, will help in that regard. And then he can go and try to build his political career if he's interested in that. And then that will be a different phase. But at least we wouldn't be having the army sucked into politics, as seems to be the case overall, because it's not really in regard to General Muhoozi. I mean, the army as an institution is being misused in terms of its involvement in politics. I've made my views on that in the past, but right now we are talking about General Muhoozi. I think that the moment he retires, it will be good for him, it will be good for the army, it will be good for even people who are in politics, so that now we know that General Muhoozi is in politics, and that's a totally different phase, and it will be handled in a totally different way.
General, and that's why you have put it clearly, institutions versus personalities there. It seems that's a trend that is also faced in also an institution like the army. When we remember General Sejusa making a comment about his retirement, up to today he hasn't left the army. When we look at General Tumukunde, made a statement on Radio 1 and CBS, and he was slapped with treason charges there. At what point, you are a champion of institutions there and structures, at what point do we have the only structure that seemed to be working, almost going to the same downtrend of every other institution in this country? How do we resurrect it? And it seems to be in agriculture, in education, in immigrations. It seems like it's the only institution that works in this country. What do we have to do with this, General?
I think that's just consistent with General Museveni's management style. Instead of fixing problems in an institution, he seeks for replacement, because I don't see like how you can be in power for 30-something years and you fail to fix agriculture extension services, and then you replace the staff with the army. So now, if you face problems in the medical sector, you are not going to take the army to go operate patients, or in schools, because unless someone is trained, they're not going to become teachers. But we have lived with that. I think we have to live with it in the short period that is left. And then my hope is that any group which goes in next is the one which will be rectifying all these problems. Because any group which goes in next, I really hope we'll have the capability to rebuild institutions, to establish functioning systems. Because General Museveni's management style is a micromanager, and it's not just him. It's not just him. Any micromanager, whether he's in politics, whether he's in business, whether it is in culture, whether it is in religion, micromanagers undermine the growth of the institutions. They compromise the strengthening of systems, because everything rotates around them. Now, in this particular case, General Museveni at his age cannot change his management style. So we have to live with that until he exits. Therefore, the next group has to have the capability to rectify all that. Now, in the meantime, my hope is that those officers and men in the army who are many of them are well educated, they are very well trained, they have got a capability to professionalize the army. And therefore, my hope is that the group which goes in will put in place the political environment and have the confidence to rebuild institutions, including the army itself. That's the only way we can solve this. It's a little bit ahead currently with the mindset that has created those same problems. I don't think that same mindset can resolve the similar problems that they have created. I highly doubt.
General, we hope that even as you've talked about the army, help us walk us through the due process of retirement. How does a senior army officer, to be particular, like you are, how does that process go on for someone to be able to retire so that the people who are here with us can be able to learn and be able to hold the leaders in power accountable there?
All officers have got an age limit beyond which, if you go, for example, let me use the example of a captain. If you've done courses and you've been promoted from a lieutenant, if you are not promoted above 28 years and you become a captain, ordinarily you are supposed to be retired. A captain is supposed to be at 36. A major, and then the following ranks, they keep on going by years. I don't know the details of all the ranks. I know that a major general, you're supposed to retire at 58. If you have hit 58 and above, and you're not promoted from being a major general to say a lieutenant general or a general, you are supposed to be retired. But I'm not so sure that that is being followed strictly yet. I think they've been building. There's been a backlog. My hope is that they'll be able to resolve that backlog. But on the other side, there's also politics which has been involved. In the past, you talk about officers. The regime has been fearful of officers who could become opposition members, politicians. And that's why at times they have clamped down on officers who speak out. That's one. But also, two, the tradition of the army. When you are in the army, when you are in uniform, you must exercise maximum restraint on what you say, how you say it, where you say it, to whom you say it. That goes with the military discipline. Unless you reach a point where you think there are things which you think cannot be resolved, and you've reached a point where you believe they cannot be resolved internally on the quiet, you can break ranks and speak. But when you do that, one, you must be ready to know that there would be clampdown. And you need to know that when clampdown happens, that in most cases it's legitimate for the institution to protect itself. So you must be ready for a fight and its consequences. Or you retire, or you ease out, and once you're out of uniform, then you can take an open position that contradicts all the things which possibly a regime stands for, if you're serving under a regime. That's the way I understand the army. That's how it operates worldwide. I mean, like in regard of the number of communications General Jose has made in the recent past, there are very few countries I can tell you where an officer would do that, and they're not called to order. That cannot happen in a country like Uganda or a few other African countries where there is no organization discipline. You just don't do that. You keep your opinions yourself. Or when you're going to speak an opinion, you check with government. If you're going to talk about an issue of foreign affairs, you check with the government. If you're going to speak, so that what you say is consistent with a position that a government has already established. You just don't go and say whatever you want to say. It cannot happen in banana republics.
Indeed, Banana Republic. General, someone asked a question here and says, General Muhoozi was appointed a senior presidential advisor on special operations while still being a serving officer. Other active officers are also working as ministers. What is your opinion on serving officers serving in political positions?
It's contrary to the law. I mean, like the minister, clearly there's a law that you have to retire, but laws here are bent all the time, and we are a compliant society, so it happens as if it is normal. There is no way, if we are following the law, the ministers who are serving officers would be still being active, I mean, having uniform. There's a law, but here laws are just taken as if it's just an inconvenience when it comes to them serving their own interests. But they don't understand that they are undermining institutions. It is quite amazing how at times people operate.
Let's come to something that is really affecting the country, a directive that was given by the president on Tuesday, whereby the executive powers vested in him, Article 98 and 99 of the Constitution, he gave a directive to the Prime Minister that the District Security Committee and the RDC will be making the final decision on who is to be evicted. Your thoughts on this and having the District Security Committee to be in charge of this? When I looked at the National Security Act and giving the mandate to the National Security Committee there, theirs is to be vigilant with intelligence, review policies. It has nothing with evictions there. Is the president
from where?
To be evicted from their properties, from land. There's been so much eviction on land from Chiriandongo to Amuria. So the president is stopping evictions by vesting powers in the District Security Committee and the RDC as the final authorities there. Your thoughts on this?
I think he's trying to respond to a crisis because people are being evicted from all over the country. There's a culture where people who have money and people who have got, power are just running people out of their, property. It's unfortunate. So it's a knee-jerk reaction. But he has got to solve the larger problem from which it stems. I don't know. Those many of the political appointees down there themselves, a number of them are corrupt. A number of them can easily be compromised. A number of them are also partisan. That in practice may also cause its own problem. But we'll wait and see how it evolves. If it creates another problem, then we'll have to start looking for solutions to that problem. But overall, really, at the end of it all, because there are so many problems that we are faced with as a country, at an operational level, if a regime was to change its ways, maybe they would have the capability to resolve those problems. I doubt whether they're about to change their ways. So again, we have to look at the next group that takes over to have the capability to meet those challenges and resolve them. I mean, like on the question of land, it's a crisis, it's countrywide. If you don't have money, you can easily be thrown off your land. You don't have money to sustain the payments of lawyers, you can lose that land. It's happening all over the country.
General, how do we solve the land question? Because land has become a very big patent issue. When you look at Chiriandongo, complaints, over 3,000 people complaining about evictions there. When you look at different places, Amuria, a park, different complaints about investors from different countries, especially in Europe, coming here and government is giving them leeway to push ordinary Ugandans off their property. How do we solve this land question moving forward?
A number of times, the character of a regime, the character of a government seeps into the rest of society, literally influences the culture in a country. More so when you've had a regime in power for such a long time, 30-something years. If you find people in government who are disciplined, who are transparent, who care about the downtrodden, the dispossessed, that will be the culture in the country. The police would not go and run people off their land if there are people in government whom they know are going to call them to order. The courts will also start acting similarly. So at the end of the day, the resolution of the problem that we see, the crisis we see in the land question, is rooted in the nature of government. So the next group which goes into power after NRM and General Museveni, his character will influence what happens in the rest of society. If, fortunately enough, it's a group of people who are disciplined, who are focused, who care about people, who would not see anybody dispossessed, the culture changes. If by any luck, any group which goes in there is a group which acts more or less in the same way as we have seen government since 1962, then most likely would continue with the same trend until another struggle comes in to clean up the mess again.
General, speaking with land, a lot has happened. People can make certificates, special certificates of title. A lot has happened with evictions of land. You have also talked about a due process of judiciary. In one of those directives by the president was to the Chief Justice, where he told him to whip his judiciary officers into position there. What does he mean by that? And also this letter he wrote to the Prime Minister. Isn't this greeting by the president reaching the elbow in the way he's exercising his executive powers there?
You know, General Museveni doesn't seem to understand that he's dealing with problems of his own creation. Because when corruption permeates judiciary, permeates civil service, permeates local government, permeates government, it is rooted in the center. Same thing I've just talked about. The nature of a government literally influences what goes on elsewhere. Because who is supposed to investigate all these people? There is no way you have people who are corrupt, who are in government, and they will clean up a criminal investigation department, clean up or strengthen the Inspector General of Government, give them resources, human as well as financial, and then create an environment where the officers who investigate know that there is nobody above the law. That the moment they have got a tight case against anybody, even if she is a mother or a father or a son or a daughter of anybody influential in government, that they can be taken out. The moment that happens, everything gets streamlined. I mean, even the judiciary is not outside of investigation. I mean, if you have got a very, very professional anti-corruption force, I can tell you they can bag so many within a year who are corrupt, including in police, including in civil service, including elsewhere. This regime cannot change that because corruption is one of the pillars of their survival. I mean, they have to use all methods of amassing money so that they can keep renting the support that they do rent, besides the use of fear as a tool for manipulating the public mind, you know?
General, one more question about land before we move on to our next topic of discussion, which will be the parish model there. And I'll also get to some questions before we go to the region there. General, when we look at the question of land, what can an ordinary Ugandan do? You have spoken about it. The president's letter almost tells the judiciary to align themselves to whatever decision has been made. How can an ordinary Ugandan deep in Kiriandongo, deep in Amur, deep in whichever village it is, Katakwi or Kiriandongo, what can they do right now to be able to get justice for the property they have there?
Right now, I'm not so sure that there is much that can be done. To be honest with you, they have to keep struggling as they do, you know, through reporting to committees, through going to courts. But all those processes, in a sense, are compromised. I have an experience, I cannot go into details in regard to land. I mean, I'm a retired Major General of the Army. If you find that someone has been busy trying to steal my land, it's now 10 years, and there's almost nothing I can do, but I stuck to the path of the courts. What about an ordinary peasant? You know? So the only solution is fixing the problems at the center. That's why those of us in the opposition, really, we need to understand the burden that we are carrying. Because any group among us that goes into power, if it is not psychologically prepared to meet all these challenges, and is organizationally skilled to make confrontation with the power groups, whether you have money, whether you are son, son's uncle, whoever you are, for everybody in the country to know that you cross the line, you'll be taken out. Then the population will continue as frustrated as they are now. Right now, I don't know. There's that bandage aid which General Museveni has proposed. Let's give them the benefit of doubt. Let's see what they do. I mean, the land cases are so many in this country. In the next 6 months, 1 year, the results will have come out to see if they're effective or not.
General, it's interesting that you have optimism in this group, because when you look at any land eviction in this country, it involves security.
Timonthy, they are the ones in existence. So what alternatives would we? They are the ones in existence. The more we work and hasten the exit, the better for the whole country. But we must also be realistic that the ones who, I mean, you can hear, General Museveni is the one creating solutions, the one sending the army to solve problems of agriculture, is the one sending the army to solve all nature of problems in areas which he should have strengthened before. That's the reality. In my life, I have a way I do things. I have a desired end state, but I'm also realistic enough to know the reality of the time. So I work to change that reality into the desired end state. But before I change that reality, I have to recognize that it is in existence and therefore operate within its limitations.
General, let me get some feedback here, some questions that have come in, so I can be able to respond to some of them there. Okay. One of the question is calling on Ugandans to support the party and resources, time and effort. Okay, thank you very much for that. This question comes from iPod, and it says, why has iPod failed to curtail the narrow space of the narrowing of political space of opposition parties? We currently have opposition supporters still in. Why has what has iPod achieved so far besides lobbying for more money for political parties?
We are not we're not members of iPod yet as NT, but personally, I really support the members who are there. There's 6, I think, 5 in the opposition. If they put that money to good use and build their capabilities and prepare, because you see, in as far as I'm concerned, working to hasten the exit of this regime is a significant objective, but also to prepare on how to manage the post-Museveni situation. Many people are so focused on regime change, which is critical because you cannot change the country unless you take power. But see, when you take power, it is not a must that you must use that power responsibly. So the preparation must be now. So the parties which access that money, put it to good use, organize yourselves, prepare, train, attract good people, outside to join you. We are trying to do that even when we are not in iPod. For us, I believe that the only way we can survive and grow is if there are Ugandans who believe in what we stand for and put money in ANT, because that is our focus. Keep on building our capabilities to attract a significant number of Ugandans. And when we talk about that, a critical number, some people think we're talking about hundreds of thousands of people. I keep telling people that you just need about 1,000 good men and women of integrity in an organization at the national level and district levels, and you radically transform this country. So in the process of building ourselves, we are simply trying to attract people who are value-driven, as we believe in Alliance for National Transformation. And I would like to believe the other parties using the money which they have, those who are in the parliament, should also keep building themselves around what they believe in and attracting people who believe in what they stand for. Because at the end of the day, you give what you have. There's nobody who's going to give you something different from what they have.
One more question, General, before we get into our next topic in the region there. Someone, William says, what shaped General Muntu's personality or discipline? More so the ability to control his emotions, feelings, and the ability to control a would-be hostile environment to a more normal one. Is it a family discipline? Is it the family discipline, army training, personal choice, or a combination of all from others? What helped him and at what extent? General, this is a question to you.
No, it's been a process. I have not always been like this. I don't know who has asked. I think you may not have wanted to meet me in my 20s. I could just, really go for confrontation, almost. But in the process of growth and also by God's grace, I've kept on, working on my character, working on the areas where I see weakness, which is something that is open to all of us because we all have the capabilities disciplining ourselves, of growing strength where we have weaknesses, and furthering strength where we already have strength. That's something which is open to all of us. There are secular ways, paths through which people do that, but there are also spiritual ways, those who are spiritual, through which they do that. So anybody who wants to move in a particular direction, wants to grow a particular character, it's within each and every human capability to do that.
Thank you, General, for that one. Let's switch gears a bit and go to the regional politics. And I want us to start from somewhere where you were as Command 1 in the army, as the army commander there. We are in DRC, the Democratic Republic of Congo. We have done phase 1 of Operation Shuja, phase 2, and now we're at phase 3. 1, we're claiming a lot of victories there. And as of today, the statement that came out from Major General Muhanga Kayanja, he said he needs reinforcement of foot soldiers, especially for protection purposes, because some of the villagers have come back to their homes. So he needs a force to be able to protect them, but also a force to be able to advance further into the jungles to be able to get out the ADF. What is your take on the real reason why we're in DRC, and can we be able to achieve the elimination of ADF once and for all, in your view?
One, as I indicated, when UPDF entered Congo at that time, I thought the first steps were correct in the sense that Uganda government negotiated with the DRC government, and they agreed on the entry of UPDF. And I believe they must have agreed on the status of forces agreement between UPDF and the Congolese army. And the only error which was made, of course, was General Museveni, as usual, not notifying Parliament. I wouldn't see any reason why he wouldn't do that. There could have been ways in which they could have done that without compromising a surprise attack. But that's his way. Any group which goes in there is the one which rectify all that. But now that UPDF is in Congo, one, I don't know whether there is a blanket over reporting, but I have not heard any negative reporting about UPDF's presence in Congo. If there is no blanket cover on reporting, and therefore everything is calm, that is commendable for UPDF, and they need to do that. Because, as I indicated in the past, and I still believe, UPDF has an opportunity to clean the image of the initial entry into Congo about 10, 15 years ago. Because the two objectives now, in as far as I can see, is defeating ADF. So all resources necessary, I think, should be put at the disposal of the commanders for them to fully achieve that mission. But two, to ensure that they maintain total discipline and control over the whole operation, over the officers and men, so that there are no human rights abuses against the Congolese people. If they are able to pull off both, then they would have recovered the image which was lost the last time, for which we are now going to compensate Congo to a tune of about $3.5 billion. Two, and it's not only ADF. My hope is that the other East African countries which border with Congo, like South Sudan, if they have the capability, Tanzania, Rwanda, Burundi, if there is an East African engagement with Congo, to completely stabilize Eastern Congo, to work with the Congo to ensure that there is development of infrastructure in Eastern Congo. The Eastern Congo trade routes can only be on the Eastern seaboard. They can only be through Mombasa or Dar es Salaam. Two, the moment there is stability in Eastern Congo and there is infrastructure and there's attraction of investment in Eastern Congo, that would be a major boost to the economies of all the neighboring countries, including the East African community economy itself. And that should be a focus of all the countries, the 6 countries in East African community. If a number of the countries were not just simply short-sighted and looking at their own individual advancements, rather than the advancement of the countries and the regional grouping.
General, how do you see this war play out? How do you see it come to one end? How do you see it play out there? Because a lot of the stories or the information, the reporting we're getting, there's no accountability, one. Two, the reporting that is happening is one-sided. It's only coming from the UPDF. and telling us how the Air Force has done, how the ground forces have done. But also we remember that a few weeks ago, there were soldiers, about 400 of them that were taken there, trained in mountaineering and how to handle different difficult situations and scenarios there. How do you see it playing out, especially looking at our history being in Congo there and knowing that in Goma, there's Rwanda. Not far from Goma, there is the UNESCO, the UN Army also that is there. How do you see it playing out there?
MINUSCO or UN forces can never change the environment, the military environment within Congo. It's just simply out of their reach. Operationally, they just simply don't have the commitment. I mean, you get someone from maybe Peru. Why would they want to die in Congo? They just have no commitment. But the national forces within the region, if they are well led, and if they are given the resources, and if they are also the political environment within the region, they can resolve the problem in Eastern Congo. I have that belief myself. And if there's failure at the level of leadership, then we can easily be sucked into the mire and end up, you know, in the graveyard of history, like many other countries have.
General, let's leave Congo and look at how, because we've been given about 170 kilometers to be able to work within that perimeter. And there are also different factions of rebel groups.
Timothy, just a second. The other issue, because of there seems to be no, I don't know, I don't have any information in regard to this. I don't know whether there are Ugandan journalists who have sought for permission and they're not allowed in. I don't know whether those who go privately without being embedded within UPDF, they are able to access. I don't know whether Congo allows them to move around, but there must be investigative reporters who would have to work out ways of how they can get information. And if information is consistent with what we are getting with UPDF, that would be good. But if information is contrary to what UPDF is said, then UPDF would be put on the spot to explain. So I believe there have to be investigative journalists who have to go down there on the ground and carry out investigations and know what is happening. My hope is that they would find out the same situation as UPDF reports. But if UPDF is just covering up, you know, you cannot, information, you can cover it for a while, but eventually it comes out. You know, they just end up with egg on their faces. So the earlier they learn in how to, if there are mistakes made, it is okay. Many armies, even the most professional, even the most well-trained armies, can make operational mistakes. My own view is that when you make a genuine mistake, if it is not deliberate, then you own up to it, and then you carry out rectification measures, and then you continue with the operations. You don't cover up.
General, isn't it suspect that last month we trained 400 officers to be able to do mountaineering and handle difficult situations in Congo, and now General Muhanga is asking for reinforcement? There's something amiss with this. How do you ask for reinforcement?
Let me, Timothy, Congo is a very difficult terrain. You have to give it to the forces which go there and they efficiently operate. Because some areas are mountainous, many areas are forested. And to fight, carry out counterinsurgency operations in densely forested areas is not a walk in the park.
Interesting. Just to conclude the question there, because the numbers they took in looked sufficient for the 170 kilometers they're in. You took in another 400 that are trained in mountaineering. You're now asking for an extra force. Why don't we get accountability on how much is being used? We also know that about 90 billion was asked as supplementary for the Congo war. Something is missing here.
To be honest with you, I don't know. I don't have the facts on the operational situation on the ground. It will be very unfair for me to make comment unless I knew that. Of course, the other confusion which this regime is, I can't understand how people, you know, when a country's army is in a foreign country, like in this particular case, what a government would do would invite the opposition forces. In this particular case, they could invite the leaders in parliament. You don't have to invite all parties, because those of us who are not in parliament, we are 28 parties. There's no way you can just go and have a meeting with 28 parties. So but you can call the 6 who are in parliament and keep giving them regular briefs. Because this is a national army, it's not an NRM army. The lucky part is that they have not hit an open crisis, and you find there is chaos around them. But you don't wait for that. You ensure that the army feels that the whole country is behind them, regardless of the challenges that they might meet on the ground operations there, or even when they are calling for resources. If they were transparent and explaining to the extent that they can to the parties in parliament, maybe we would be having a different picture. I have no picture myself, to be honest with you. So I wouldn't want to hazard comments based on just feelings. I can't. But if the facts emerge that there are things they are messing up, then we would put them on the spot without doubt.
Thank you, General. Let's leave Congo and go to the East African community there. 1967 to 1977, it's there. Then it dies and picks up again around the 1999 there, between 3 presidents there of Kenya, Tanzania, and Uganda. It starts again there on 4 pillars, basically, and you were a member of Yala then. One of the things was the customs union, the monetary union there. Then we talk about the political federation. Is this possible to realize in this time and space? Looking at what happened, the border of Rwanda has just been opened to personnel moving in. And also looking at the day it was opened, you can hardly count the number of buses that crisscross. Can this federation really work? The East African community, can it really work?
It should. We should. We must make it work. You know, overall, we are very small countries all over Africa. If we are small in size, but strong in terms of economies, then the economies would compensate. But we are weak economically, weak militarily, and combined 54 countries. If we continue in the situation in which we are, when you look at the global situation, there's a realignment of forces globally. There are reasons why every big power is focusing on Africa. Europe is focusing on Africa. China is focusing on Africa. Russia is focusing on Africa. United States is focusing on Africa. Turkey is focusing on Africa. There is a reason why. Now, if we are not strong enough to hold our own side of the bargain, we can easily be exploited like we were exploited during the colonial times. So regional blocks are the most immediate answer to the strengthening of the continent. If you can have East African community realize, now we are 7, realize the customs union, which is already being functioning, be bold and far-sighted, and not be so narrow-minded as the number of leaders are now, looking at the single entities that the countries are, and therefore make the necessary sacrifices for the common market to work. Because there is no way you can allow capital to move and you do not open up for labor, and you think that the capital, that the common market can work. It simply can't. Remove all non-tariff barriers to trade, and then push towards the common currency, monetary union. And possibly and hopefully, and I really would like to believe that a political federation is also possible. The moment East Africa pulls off that, then it becomes an example for ECOWAS, becomes an example for SADC. Maybe Maghreb may also follow suit. But you can imagine if SADC integrated, East African community integrated, ECOWAS integrated, that would be a powerful Africa. Until very recent, it was not in my understanding at all. It only came to my awareness about a year ago. In terms of land mass, you put United States, Europe, and China into Africa, and they fit. In terms of African land mass. In terms of population, as we speak, Africa is about 1.2 billion people. In another 35 years, 40 years, the projections for African populations are going to become about 2.3 billion. What does that mean? If you don't build the necessary capabilities to feed those people, to educate them, to take care of their health needs, to create work for them, there can easily be a crisis. And if there's weakness in governance, we can easily be recolonized, not direct, but through political means.
General, and you make very good submissions, especially on how we need to come together as a bloc. And that's where I want to come to the economy that you've talked about, the customs union, where we're supposed to have non-tariff barriers there, movement of labor, movement of goods and services across the East African bloc there. But when we look at just a few months or last year, where Kenya blocked maize going there, Tanzania blocked sugar from going there, poultry products, milk being blocked from Kenya, 3 years of the border between Uganda and Rwanda being blocked there. The protectionism of the economy is there. Is it possible to really have this federation, to have the customs union, free movement of labor and services across, that you can be able to go and establish yourself in Kenya or Rwanda? Is that possible? Especially looking at the countries almost seem like they have selfish intentions there. Your thoughts on the economies there?
We must keep pushing. You know, it's a question of survival, to be honest with you. Integration, economic integration, is a question of survival. It's not a question of wishing or simply out of any emotional considerations. It's a question of survival. If we want to live as a free people in this world, as an African people, integration should be an issue where there should be no compromises at all. Therefore, the people who are so short-sighted, who are driven more by selfish motives, because in a number of times when you hear, this country banning this, you find that there are politicians maybe who have imported that very product from another place, and therefore they want to restrict the market. There are still people like that, but you must keep on building a critical number of East Africans in all these countries to overwhelm such narrow, petty-minded politicians, and maybe drive them into the oceans, if that was possible.
Sticking to the economy, DRC asking to come on to join there, the East African bloc there, but also you look at about 90 million people there to join the bloc, makes the market bigger there. But the question is, Kenya is already a middle-income country, lower middle income. Tanzania is thriving to join the upper middle income status there. Isn't just us bringing a peasant party together of different peasants to come into one party there? Because the differences in economic statuses, income statuses, isn't that going to become a variant that causes us to have this customs union become a bloc instead of a success?
I think, sorry to use this example, but it's maybe the closest I can come to. I read somewhere where someone was comparing African economies and advancing a reason that therefore integration becomes difficult. Then someone used an example that, a discussion of that nature would be like a discussion amongst pygmies, arguing about who is taller than the other. If that's their natural state, like you find maybe they are all 3 feet, and someone says, I am 3'1", there's another is 2'9", 2 feet 9 inches. But the question is that you are, I don't know which other example I can use, which doesn't maybe refer to human beings. Whether it is Kenya, whether it's Congo, whether it is Uganda, whether it is all these countries, which country is beyond 3,000 United States dollars in terms of per capita income? It's only Kenya which is close to that. Uganda is about 1,000. I don't know, Congo maybe is also around that, and maybe another one is 1/3. But we're talking about a country like South Korea, for which we are at the same level. It's now 22,000 United States dollars. Singapore is at 45,000 United States dollars. The only way we can advance is combine resources as a region, and it's not in conflict at all. It's not in conflict integrating these economies, even if they are at different stages of development. One a little bit ahead of the other, like Kenya, But as you know, there's a time when the balance of trade between Kenya and Uganda was so tilted in favor of Kenya. But now there is a significant balancing in regard to that. If Congo comes on board, Tanzania comes on board, South Sudan is on board, and the economies are integrated. Who cares if you are a citizen of the United States, whether you are in California, whether you are in Washington, whether you are in Boston, whether you are in Florida, you can move your business in any of those states. You can move in any of those states for services. You can go and become resident in those countries. It is one huge United States of America with 54, is it 52 or 50 states. Basically, that's what we'll be talking about. But we are a very strange species of people. We are so stuck these borders, which basically were not even our own creation. They were not a natural progression. And we have hardly lived with these borders for, it's not more than 100 years. Or maybe, yes, it's more than 100 years, maybe 110, maybe we can create new borders. Because the Indian Ocean can be a border and Atlantic be a border. Once you have integrated East Africa, and then you have where South Sudan borders with Khartoum, that becomes a new border. And then you all become East African, that becomes a new identity. Really, what would it have changed? What? It's just emotional attachments to petty considerations. When we're dealing with issues, existential threats, when we're dealing with issues of survival as a people. Because you can imagine 54 countries which are almost considered irrelevant, which is when it comes to global issues. Remember, UN, which is a global, I saw recently the presidents pushing to have 2 African countries on the Security Council. They are literally begging. Africa, as it is, begging to have 2 members. If we do what is necessary to be done, I don't think that AU would be begging. They would be demanding.
General,
and the demands would be met because the demands would be backed by capacity.
General, one more question about the East African community there, then we'll be able to move to Russia and Ukraine there, because some of the questions I see coming through the comment section here about Russia and Ukraine there, and I'll be reading some of them. You can still drop your questions here. General Muntu will be responding to them in a short while there, and we have about 30 minutes to be able to engage in our last bit of the conversation. General, I want to come to one of the things Mwalimu Julius Nyerere said about the East African community was that why it failed was because it was leader-led and not people-led. How do we get the East African community to be people-led and not leader-led? Because we have done a survey. 1 out of 10 Ugandans has a faint understanding of what the East African community is all about. How do we get it to the people to appreciate it and be able to push it amongst themselves there?
The middle class is the one which can make a push. The intelligentsia, the business people, because business people trade. So and also, for example, the professionals. For example, if you make the common market operational, where there can be free movement of labor, that would build the image and the necessity of the integration process. It will get on the forefront. Peasants, they may not relate to East Africa that much because you even see it at the national level. I mean, a peasant like where I come from Russia may not even understand what is in Mbale, understand what is in Kitgum. But the middle class is mobile. And then once economies grow, then the peasant is also transformed through education, through engaging in businesses, and it becomes one huge area of people who keep moving from one end to another if there's need for them to move. So there must be people who believe in that and who become active promoters of, in each country, active promoters for the integration process. They must understand the political dynamics. They must understand the economic dynamics. Because, many people who are settled, in one country, who may not understand the threat that we face, even as a continent, even as single countries, may not even be bothered. But the people who understand the existential threat in which we exist right now, even at a global level, they must do more than so far what is being done. But if the leaders are more focused and they are not narrow-minded, they can drive the process and can move faster. The unfortunate thing is in the 70s, we had Amin here. Amin is someone who couldn't comprehend things, for example, at that level. And then, of course, there was a conflict between Nyerere and Amin, and they could not meet. And of course, I think there are also global forces involved. And eventually, the whole thing collapsed. And there were also business people in Kenya who were so short-sighted. And that's created the demise of the community. But I believe as we picked from the ashes, we can learn lessons from the past. There seems to be more desire now, because you see the countries which are, asking for entry, like DRC of recent. I think where we are, there seems to be a feeling that in spite of the unease in the region in regard to some of the countries, there seems to be at least knowing, a number of leaders seem to know that this thing needs to be made to work. And some of the roadblocks are going also to be removed because the leaders are not a permanent fixture. They keep coming and going. So one hopes that the next generation of leaders is more focused, is more disciplined.
Let's tackle our last subject in these last 11 minutes there. And
Yes.
Someone asks a question here that I kept for now. He says, General Muntu, if you were the president
Yes.
of Uganda, would you take UPDF to Russia to fight Ukraine or to help Ukraine defeat its territorial rivals there, Russia? Your thoughts on the invasion of Russia or the attack on Ukraine there?
One, I don't see any reason why an African force should go to Russia. We have got a number of challenges on the African continent. You'd rather move and reinforce. If there was any need for reinforcement, you could move forces into like West Africa, where Boko Haram is causing chaos. Or like, I think African forces should first concentrate on stabilizing Africa. I would see no reason why any African force should go to the conflict in Russia and Ukraine. Russia made a mistake. I think there were definitely issues that they keep raising, which are legitimate. I have a feeling that, and I have no understanding why Europe and the United States of America made it seem that it was possible for Ukraine to become a member of NATO and expect that Russia would not react. I can't comprehend how they would think like that. Yes, I believe it could become part of EU, and maybe the situation remains normal. But for it to become a member of NATO and is on the doorstep of Russia, and you know how Russia is, the power structure, the culture, the history, and the recent experiences of the past in Crimea, in Georgia, there's also in Chechnya. How would they expect that Russia would not be drawn into a fight? And what would it cost if Ukraine did not become a member of NATO? But for Russia also to know that, yes, Ukraine is not going to become a member of NATO, but it will remain a buffer. If you want to make confrontation, we will have a fight so that Ukraine remains neutral, just like I think Finland is being neutral. It's a member of EU, but it's not a member of NATO. I don't have an understanding of why things happen that way in EU, but anyway, now there is a war. Russia decided to attack militarily. But from my estimation of things as they unfold, the way I look at things, I don't see how Russia can win that war. It has superior capability in terms of weapons, in terms of the size of the army, but it is not weapons which win wars. When you meet people like Ukrainians seem to have galvanized themselves to fight to the death for their freedoms, there is no nature of weapons other than maybe nuking them out of existence. You cannot conquer them. You can occupy cities, but they're not going to occupy that country. They will bleed the Russian army to death if it hangs in there for a year or so. The casualties they will take will be unsustainable. So at the end of the day, I suppose that there have to be some negotiated settlement in that region, in that conflict.
Where do you see our position as a country, being that in terms of trade, Russia, the president has come out to say that people from the East are more willing to give funding and the necessities that the president and the government require. And we seem to have leaned that side, especially also looking at the president's meeting with the ambassador from Russia there. Where do you see this conflict putting Uganda as a country there?
I don't think it's only going to be Uganda. I think quite a number of African countries are caught up in that dilemma. I don't know, I've not had any briefing or any discussions with any of these countries that decided, for example, to, to remain neutral. But reading it from a distance, I suspect that that could easily become the trend, as was during the Cold War. Because during the Cold War, there was the Warsaw Pact, then there was NATO. Many African countries chose to be non-aligned. There was what they called a non-aligned movement. You know, so I have a suspicion that there is a likelihood for that to develop, so that they are non-aligned, but they can take positions on different issues as they emerge. I don't know, this situation is new. We'll keep watching as it evolves. But at the same time, they should not make anybody, whether it is Russia, whether it is America, whether it is China, all countries should make it understood. All countries which are powerful in terms of economic size, in terms of military capabilities, to think that you can walk over other people if you think that they are weak. That should become part of history.
General, let's. We have about 5 minutes.
And I can't simply understand, because there are lessons that need to be learned. Afghanistan is a common area. You may disagree with Afghanistan's ideological orientation. Definitely, there are a lot of questions on that. But there's one thing you cannot deny: that twice they have defeated a superpower. They defeated Soviet Union. Recently, America pulled out because they found they could not win that war. But look at Afghanistan. It's a poor country. They're not that heavily armed. So what fights, and that's what you need to understand even as an African people, what fights are not weapons. It's the will to be a free people. And then two, even when you are a free people, you need to do what is right, even in regard to others. I think that's why the Afghans have a problem. Whatever ideology you have, you don't just go and cause chaos in other people. You know?
General, we have run out of time. We have about 4 minutes here to be able to close, but your concluding remarks on the situation and the state of the affairs of politics in this country, as your concluding remarks there.
First, I would like to thank you, Timonthy, for hosting me. I'd like to thank all the colleagues who've been on the different platforms. We apologize for the number of technical glitches on some of the platforms. Some are completely outside our own control, unstable networks. But at the end of it all, Uganda, we are 42 million people, I think moving towards 45. In about 25 years, we will have hit 100 million people. We have to do things day and night, 24/7, to build a critical mass of people in influence in the economy, in politics, in the religious groups, in the cultural groups, in the peasantry, in the professionals, to shape a better future for our country, where we can all coexist as equal before the law, with equal opportunities, with fair systems, transparent systems of managing national resources, and then build ourselves to become strong as a country in the regional integration process, to participate, so that even when we build our own capabilities, that we know that we have the capability to protect ourselves. That happens when there are people who are determined in the mind. That's where the wars are won or lost.
Thank you very
Therefore, I'd
much.
like to thank you, colleagues, ladies and gentlemen. May God richly bless you.
Thank you very much, General Muntu there. Those were the submissions, and we came from discussing national issues to regional issues, and also touched a bit of Russia and Ukraine there. And you had the submissions from the General there. Some of them personal, some come from the national, from the Alliance for National Transformation there. And you have had what your take is from all this, and the ones who have asked questions. Thank you very much. The ones who have dropped them in the chat. We also thank the ones that have joined us on Zoom. We also thank the ones that have joined us on YouTube and Facebook there. We really apologize, just to re-echo the General's words there. We apologize for the Twitter spaces there that were on and off, and those were really technical glitches. We hope to improve them further. We thank you very much for joining us. Until next time, when we have a conversation with the General or Honorable Alisa Lasso there, God bless you and have a fabulous weekend.
So we hang on for a private follow-up one. About how many minutes?
14 minutes.
Okay.
All right, thank you.
Timonthy, thank you.